Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Monday night Sonar Masterclass, and welcome along to our guest tonight, Vinnie Versfeld. Good to have you here, mate.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me back again. It's good to be on it. A little bit daunting doing it this way, that's for sure. But we'll see how we go.
Settle in. We'll make you feel welcome, mate. You'll settle in, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. We always do on these Sonar Masterclasses. So, cool. Folks, if you're coming into this live stream on Facebook, or if you're coming in on YouTube, you could be coming in from a number of different sources. Let us know where you're coming in from. Tell us where you're from. Tell us where you like to do your barra fishing. Say hello. Let us know that you can hear us okay. That's always a bit of a worry when we're live streaming, is that we can hear ourselves and other people might not hear us. But give us a little bit of feedback. And what we're going to do is spend just a few minutes having a bit of a chat generally about barra fishing at this time of year. Vinny's straight off the water today. He's been out with a client all day, yesterday as well, I believe.
Yeah, we did a 2-day. Just chasing some impoundment fish,
Got onto a few fish, which is always a good thing when you're a guide. Makes you feel a little bit more relaxed about things. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Vinny, tell us about this time of year. We're going to focus on impoundment barra because obviously, you and I are in Queensland. A lot of our viewers will be in Queensland. If you happen to be in Northern Territory, things are a bit easier. You can still fish for barra. But if you're in Queensland like us, the salty barra, they're closed now until February. But the impoundment barra, they're still available. They can take a bit more working out, I reckon.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is with impoundment barra is they're not driven by tides, so their bait's not driven by tides. So they can be trickier, but there's definitely sort of times that you can sort of narrow down, per se bite times and that sort of gear, and definitely crack onto them, and they're a good option too, to go and chase in the off season. With that sort of stuff, there's a lot of things that apply in the fresh that you can go and put back in the salt again.
Yeah. And look, it is the same fish, but of course, when we hit the estuaries, one of the first things we're looking for, or even the coastal areas, of course, one of the first things we look for to determine where the barra are going to be is the tides. We work ourselves around that no run, no fun type scenario, and figuring out how the the water movement, the currents are aggregating the bait fish and where they're going to accumulate the barramundi as well. Not quite the same in an impoundment, of course. You do have some currents, but nothing like the currents you have in the estuaries. So tell us about how you go. If you were going to a new impoundment you never fished before and, Barrow were your target, mate, how would you go about, finding the fish in the first instance? What's your strategy?
I think probably the biggest thing there would be experience. Kick it off with that. Go with what you know. I think approaching any new water is a lot to do with confidence in your current fishing style, and then certain telltale signs from there. Then I'll start looking at structure firstly, points. Anything that's going to congregate bait and dissimilar structure as well. If you're going from a tree line to a weed bed, where that change is, I'll be concentrating on those sort of areas. Look for bait, telltale birds. Faust is a prime example. You can quite often find barra out in the basin there feeding under birds. When you've got birds feeding on herring out in the basin there. So that sort of stuff. 9 times out of 10, it just takes you to catch that first one. Just to give you that bit of a boost, knowing that you're on the right track with them. Yeah.
Now, guys, just excuse me. I am listening to Vinny intently as I do things here, but we haven't had anyone comment in the chat box yet. So I'm a bit concerned that either chat's not working or that nobody's hearing us. But we've got 39 or 40 people in the room at the moment in various different Facebook pages. So, guys, if you are listening in, if you can hear us okay, let us know. I'm also having a look on Facebook as we go to just see what's going on at that end. So we might be just bodging it a little bit, mate, which has happened only once before, but
that's right.
We got by, and we'll get by again this time. So, mate, typically, as I said, when we're fishing for barra in salt water, and when I talk to guests, we've got David Batang there. Look, thank you, David, for letting us know that you can hear us. And I hope I got your name right, mate. So thanks so much for letting us know that you're there and the chat's working. That'll save me faffing around, and I'll concentrate now on what we're doing. So, so typically if we're fishing in the salt water, we know where we're going to start looking. In the freshwater, it's a little bit more tricky because, the fish can be anywhere. The tide's not accumulating. But what are the other factors when you're fishing in impoundments, if it's not tide, what are the other factors that lead to good barra fishing? Do you look for the barometric pressure? Do you look at the lunar cycles? Do you like rising water levels, falling water levels? What are the things that you'd say, get these things together, this is going to be a hot bite?
Moon phase. I'm
Yep.
not too sort of fussy about barometric pressure.
Okay.
Definitely barometric changes will affect bite times. But if I do find that fish turned on, from sounding them up, knowing that there's fish around and they're not eating, to next minute they start eating, I've never sort of checked to see what the barometric pressure was doing. I definitely do work around lunar cycles. So my biggest factors there are moon rise, moon overhead or below, depending what your moon phase is, and moon set again, and tide changes, which adversely coincides with that. So if you definitely go and concentrate your efforts around the nearest tidal changes, which I know sounds ridiculous because there's no tidal change in dams, but that's the easiest way to sort of figure out what your lunar cycle is doing. And it definitely 100%, like you could set a clock to it, like nothing's 100% foolproof, but when you have that tide change, an hour either side of said change, 99.9% of the times, if you're going to get a bite out of fish, that's when you're going to get it.
Yep. What about those, lovely Saluna tables, mate, that so many people like to look at and refer to and just read off a table, this is going to be a hot bite period for the next, 45 minutes, whatever. How do they equate for the, North Queensland stories when it comes to Barrow?
I think they'll give you a good guide, of what to start looking for. Some are good, some are not so good. So I sort of try and work it out myself. If I'm fishing Faust, I'll be looking at the Whitsunday's tide table. I'll be seeing what the tides are doing out at the mouth of the Prossie River. If I'm fishing Kinshant or something, up in Mackay, then I'd definitely be looking at Mackay tides, because it does change, obviously as you move around. Then I'll be looking at that sort of stuff, and that's basically what those sort of lunar cycle type, bite prediction.
Yep, we've lost Vinny. Can you hear me, Vinny? Well, folks, we seem to have lost our guest temporarily, so I'm going to go through. We've got a few people in the room. Hopefully, Vinny will come back to us in just a moment. So we've got David, we've got Matt, we've got Adam, we've got Dan, and we've got Bob. So, guys, thanks so much for letting us know that you can hear us. That's a good start. But as long as we don't have a guest, he's back. Can you hear me? Vinny? Yeah, we lost you momentarily, mate. So hopefully that won't happen too often throughout the course of the evening. But
no, I just quite enjoyed just talking to myself there for a while.
Yeah, look, and it's the first sign of madness, but mate, I've seen the second, third, and fourth signs of madness in myself, so it doesn't bother me too much anymore. So it's all good. Now, folks, we've got Vinny here for an hour or so to go through and do some Q&A stuff. We've got some screenshots to show you. So for those who haven't come along to one of these masterclasses before, that's the way it works. We're going to throw up some screenshots. We're going to have a bit of a chat about those. But mostly, guys, we're here to answer your questions. So thanks, everybody, for your understanding on the little video glitch there. It's nice to see that everybody's got a sense of humor. So what we're going to do, we've lost him again. He's disappeared completely.
Crazy.
What we're going to do as soon as we get Vinny back, this is the Mr.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't touch anything.
I'm not sure what's going on there. But look, what we'll do in just a moment, we'll throw up a screenshot. We'll have a chat about that. And that way we don't have to see you or I, mate. We can just have a chat. Folks, what I was about to say is this is a Sonar Masterclass. Now I'm being harassed by a fly. This is a Sonar Masterclass. We're going to talk about Sonar, but we don't have to stick just to Sonar. So if you've got questions about barramundi fishing more generally, feel free to fire those through as well. We're happy to talk fishing. We're happy to talk Sonar. We're happy to talk whatever you'd like to talk about over the next hour or so. And hopefully you can get a few tips from Vinny about how to get a few barra. So we've got a couple of questions starting to come through. So Michael, yes, it will be cool if we can stay on air. That would be great. So David's asking a question, Vinny. I'll bring it up on the screen. So what would be your go-to lure, mate? Or go-to lure or plastic for impoundment barra?
If I had to choose one to throw all the time, it would be, well, up until recently, it would have been a 6-inch Z-Man Swimmers, rigged weedless on the Snake Locks jig heads. The cool thing about those guys with the paddle tail gives good vibration. So in dirty water, dense vegetation, that sort of stuff, that vibration kicking out gives the barra something to hone in on before they eat it, right? So it gives them, you know, something to sort of find quicker. Obviously, with the weedless or snag-proof option with the Snake Locks heads, you can fish them in a variety of structures and even open water, and they're still going to work. So they give you that sort of level of versatility. Then the other thing about them is with the interchangeable weights, you can fish the whole water column. So you can fish from, you know, subsurface, virtually a surface lure, right down to slow rolling them in 5-6 meters of water over rock bars and weed beds and that sort of stuff. But then I think last year or the year just before, they did bring out that new range of the diesel minnows in the Z-Mans. So my pick there would 100% be the 5-inch because of the deeper body and them and the thicker tail. You get more of a body roll out of them, and I think they just kick out a better action than the 6-inch swimmers do. And again, you know, like fish them on the Snake Locks, just rig them weedless. You know, they come with decent hooks and wide gape hooks on them, which is really good for trying to find the corner of a barra's mouth, you know, when it inhales a big bait. So that the 5-inch diesel minnows in pearl, that pearl color would be my standout color, irrespective of where I'm fishing for barra, whether it's fresh or salt. And then just rigged on those Snake Locks heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, mate, I know, you know, if you look at the Northern Territory, it's not uncommon to use sort of 160, 180 millimeter lures. My experience in Queensland, though, has been that the barramundi, even the meter plus fish, tend to take a smaller lure more frequently. So what's your call on that?
Again, like match the hatch. You know, fish, Northern Territory fish, you know, they be feeding on big mullet, you know, occasionally, you know, small tarpon, milkfish, that sort of stuff. If you're fishing an impoundment where you've got a big biomass of small bony bream, then definitely downsize it. You know, match that. Then run. You know, I've caught fishing impoundments on 3-inch plastics. If you're fishing a dam that's got a lot of tilapia in, for argument's sake, or something like that, then definitely I'd increase my bait profile to try and match that, and try and see what they're feeding on. Match the hatch, you know, irrespective of where you're going. That's pretty critical.
Good rule of thumb. All right, we've got a question from Stephen and one from Cormac. So we'll start with Stephen Wilson first. So Stephen's asking, Vinny, how important are those bite times, mate?
I'd say they're pretty important. Tongue in cheek, they're not the be all and end all. If you put a lure in front of a fish, they're opportunistic. If you put a lure in front of a fish, you could eventually get them to bite. You can annoy them enough that they'll have a swipe at it. You know, often find if that's happening, that's when you actually hook them on the outside of the mouths or up the top of the face or something like that. You know, they're coming, they're having a crack, but they're not actively feeding. You know, I'll go and fish an impoundment. I'll cast all day long, but I'll definitely be, you know, paying good attention on when my bite times are and when to expect those fish. You know, a bloke that I know, Lee Wallace, he gave me a really good analogy, and it was ABC. You know, always be casting. You know, you've got a best chance of catching one when your lure's in the water.
Absolutely. Mate, here's a little fishy fact I'll throw in just to make things interesting. So, you know, when fish get hooked on the side of the face, particularly around the cheeks and the outside of the mouth, what a lot of people don't realise is, there's that fly again, what a lot of people don't realise is that fish don't have many taste buds inside their mouths. Most of their taste buds are on the outsides of their mouths, around their face, down the lateral line, on the fins as well. And so quite often I suspect when they're caught on the side of the face, that fly's going to really annoy me. When they're caught on the side of the face, I suspect sometimes they're actually tasting the lure, because by the time it gets into their mouth, they can't taste it anymore. So there's just a little fishy fact.
Yeah, cool.
Right, so question from Cormac, and his question is, there's a lot of talk and hype around the side scan and down scan. Do you ever rely on just normal sonar these days?
I run exclusively side scan and down scan. The only time I'll run sonar in an impoundment is when I'm driving to the next spot and I'm just checking depth on it. So you'll see on some of my screenshots coming up today, like my top screen is like I run a split screen of side scan and down scan together. My top screen will be my side scan split, and then yeah, with the adjusted splits, I run my down scan. So yeah, 100%. Yeah, that gives you, well, firstly, especially with Barrow, because of their large profiles, they're easy to find on side scan. What I use the down scan for predominantly is to see what those fish are actually doing. And so one of the screenshots that we got in there, I think it was one of fishing about 5 or 7 meters of water. You can see a couple of stationary fish, and then there's a couple of brush strokes through it, and that's fish that have been moving. So those fish either moved because they're feeding or moved because the boat went over them. So yeah, that's 100%. If you're chasing impoundment barrow, yeah, have it. If you don't have it, get it. Yeah, that definitely is an absolute game changer.
Yep. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple more questions, then maybe we'll bring up one of the screenshots. So we've got Don asking, do you fish the moon phase, say full or new moon? What are your preferences?
Yeah, preferences would be on the full moon, the night or the day of the full moon, and then 2 days after that. And then new moon, yeah, I'll try and fish like we just did now. The 2 days around that new moon. That's when you find that you'll get your bigger tide changes, so your lunar cycle's bigger. Yeah, definitely you get an increased bite around that. Then it'll taper off quite quickly. Actually, over the next, so from say today till say Wednesday or Thursday, if I'm quickly doing the maths in my head, it'll taper down, probably by 60-70%. Your fish's feeding time, and then it'll start picking up again. And I think, you probably know better about this, Greg, than I do. This is just my theory. I think because the fish feed so hard over the full or the new moon that it takes them a little bit of time to digest what they've eaten before they actually get hungry again. And that could, like I said, it's just my theory that the bites actually taper down, then it'll start peaking back up again towards your next lunar cycle.
Look, and I've heard that theory before, and I can't see any reason not to believe it. But I have to say, if anyone tells you they know the absolute truth, the absolute answer there, they're probably having a piece of you, because I think there's a lot to know. And I think, if you think about those periods on a bright day that fish best, they're always the dawn and the dusk, the twilight periods, right? If you've got a full moon, you've essentially got twilight for a large part of the night. So that bite window is extended for a large part of the night. So it makes perfect sense that they may slow down during the day and rest up a little bit. So the other thing is that a lot of people don't realize that fish actually sleep as well. So they can't shut their eyes. They don't have eyelids. They don't have the ability to adjust the amount of light coming in. They can't dilate their pupils or constrict their pupils. And so when they're exposed to light all night on a full moon, they're probably tired and lethargic during the day as well. So there's a few things probably coming into play there. So, and as I say, these are all theories, and I don't know that anybody's got the precise answer. So Ben's got a question about hard-bodied lures. How do you work your hard bodies in the impoundment once you've found the barra?
That's going to be trial and error. That's going to have to be playing around to how those fish are feeding and how they're responding to the lure that you're throwing. For argument's sake, we had a really good bite on fish eating shallow divers that, I'm talking, divers that dive down to probably a meter just on a dead slow roll. No twitching, no pausing. No, if you twitched it or paused it or worked it aggressively, or burnt them too fast, they wouldn't touch them. But if you just got into a steady pace and just a dead slow roll, they'd eat them. Another good retrieve rate, especially at night time, actually, is what they call the 7-second pause. So on suspending lures like Rapala, X-Raps, squirrels, those sort of things, cast them out, rip them down, to their diving depth, and then pause them and literally tension up your line on that lure, count 7 seconds, sometimes 10, sometimes even 15 seconds before you twitch it again. And I know it sounds absurd, but quite often you'll actually get that bite when that lure is absolutely stationary and not moving at all. If you're fishing floating, diving minnows and you get there's a bit of a surface bite going on or that sort of stuff, or you fish are feeding higher up in the water column, twitch and pause, definitely. With the twitch and pause, though, I will throw in there, make sure that you've got contact with your line at all time. Try and avoid getting any slack between the twitches, because I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10 they'll pick it up right as soon as you stop and you go to take up that bit of slack after the twitch. That's when they're going to eat it. Yeah. And that another thing that I'll actually point out while we're talking about that, when you're getting a hard-body lure into some timber and you're slowly tweaking it through there, you'll often find that after you've shaken that lure off or flicked it off on the braid tension, they'll eat it the minute it pops off the snag. So if you ever do get one snag in timber and there's fish around, I'd be mindful that it might get eaten the minute it pops off the snag. When you've got braid wrapped around your fingers and everything's going wrong and you're having a bad time because you've got snag. So they might surprise you like that. It happens quite a bit.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. All right, Vinnie, let's bring up one of your screenshots, mate, and we get a bit of a chat about what people can look for on their sonar when they're trying to find Barrow. So these are some screenshots that you've collected over the last couple of days while you've been out on the water with a client. So this is fresh intel, mate, but we're not going to tell you where you were fishing.
Yeah, no, this one, looking at this one, it might be an older one. Okay. So well, basically what you got here is you can see in the side scan there. What we got is a tree that's passing just slightly off to the right hand side of the boat, under the transducer there, and there's a couple of fish sitting, just a little bit down from that. So the fish is virtually under the boat there, as you can see, but it's throwing the shadow off right off to the right hand side there, and then there's a couple of more, just on that sort of top left hand side screen there. Those fish to me appear stationary. But they're sitting tight in that structure. So, I'll be fishing that timber pretty hard on those guys.
So when you find stationary fish that are tight into structure, what's your strategy? I mean, obviously, fish are feeding and you can see that they're active. Your strategy might be a bit different. If they're stationary, they're in tight to timber. Do you need to wake them up a little bit? Do you need to rat a lure around the timber? Do you need to get it right in their faces? What's your strategy?
Absolutely, harass them. And this comes back to that one question that we had about the side scan and the down scan. It gives you a lot of confidence. If that fish there potentially would not have found that on normal sonar, right? Or you wouldn't have seen that. Hey, there's a barrow sitting there with a couple of mates around just the front edge of that. So that confidence that it gives you that the tree that you're fishing in this question has got fish in it, that's crucial. And then just pepper it. Like, they'll be in there for a reason. They will eventually feed. So if they don't bite straight away, I'd sit on the snag like that. If there's if there's a lot of fish hanging around in there, then I'd fish it. I'd spend 2-3 hours on that.
That long.
If there's good fish there, and I think that's probably the biggest mental game with impoundment fishing is knowing that there's fish there, knowing that they're going to eat at some stage, and then just sitting on them and peppering them. And I know, you get 20 minutes, half an hour in to fishing, and you're not getting any bites. Then you start questioning yourself, and you're like, do I need to change lures? That's normally the first thing that happens. The lures that I had tied onto my rods when we left here 2 days ago, they still barring a couple that we lost to fish in trees. The same lures are still tied onto the rods. So don't change too quick, and just have that. They're there. So that's like 50% of the battle won. You found fish, so just sit on them. Don't try and move. My biggest thing probably is the old theory of never leave fish to find fish. Or if they don't eat within an hour or 2 hours, then mark them, leave, go and try something else, give them a bit of a rest, and then come back and see what they're doing then.
Yep, there might just be some factor that's going to change that you might not even notice. A change of wind, barometric pressure, moon above, moon below, something like that. That suddenly they're going to switch on. If you're there, for the long time and you're casting, well, you got some chance of catching them. So
yeah, quite often, you need to get that one to bite, whether they're in a feeding mode or not, and if you can get the one to bite, then it might spur the other ones. They can hear a fish boofing bait under the water a mile away better than we can, and if you can get that one to bite, then the other one's hanging around, they might go, oh, wait, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Why is old mate having a feed? And then, you can definitely turn them on like that.
It's definitely the case that once one of the schools starts to feed, it often fires up the rest. There's another thing, I'm going all scientific here again, mate, but there's another thing, it's called bile acids. It's a byproduct of fish digestion. So when they've been feeding, they produce this thing that they excrete called bile acids, and other fish can actually smell that. So when they pick that up in the water, they know that there's been feeding going on recently, and that seems to switch them on as well. So I suspect there's a bit of that going on. They read each other's body language. They feel the vibrations, as you say. They hear the boof. And it's like, hang on, what am I missing out on here? So they start to fire up. Another question coming through here from Steve, and I'm going to read it out because it won't be visible or the whole question won't be visible to everybody. So Stephen's asking, do you think the sound of your motor going past a snag affects or scares them off at all? So lots of people driving slowly with side scan on, but not on their electric motor. Does that affect the fish at all?
I think sometimes, definitely could, depending on what mood they're in. You'll find that most people are driving slow while they're side scanning is because that's when it's easier to find fish. That's when your sonar is giving you a better return, and then you can definitely see Barrow a lot easier. I find a lot more fish just on my electric than I do. I hardly ever just sort of idle around just looking for fish, because like I said, I'm always casting anyway. So if I find a likely area where I do want to look for fish, I'll be lecky down, watching my sonar and casting at the same time. Your sonar is only telling you what's happening off to the side and behind your boat, unless you've got a live scope or something like that going off in the front. Your lure, the lure that you're casting to the front of the boat, that's what's telling you what's happening out there. But slow, definitely. Boat noise, critical. I'm not a fan of boat noise at all. I try and avoid it absolutely at all costs. My opinion about that is I think that boat noise, in their environment is unnatural. Most of the places that I fish anyways, the Ross River up here in Townsville is, that's part of the stock impoundment scheme now, and that's a great place to just, go and hone your skills and practice. But they water ski in there nearly daily this time of year. So the fish there are used to boat noise. So, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from fanging around there, trying to find fish, with your motor.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep. Really depends on where you're fishing and what they're used to. But
it depends on what mood they're in. Definitely, if they're in an aggressive feeding mood and that, they're not sort of paying good attention to what's happening around them, then it probably won't be that critical. But if they are shut down and they are flighty, especially in places where you've got really clean water and that sort of stuff, then I'll definitely be cautious of that.
Yep. All right, mate. Let's bring up another one of your screenshots and see what you've got there for us.
Yeah, right. So this is a couple of fish on the down scan. You can see there's one stationary fish. There's a couple of fish, probably representing side on, so facing the transducer in that one. And then the two on either side of it, those ones coming up as brush strokes, they're definitely moving. I suspect that they would have moved because the boat went over them. So you can see how they come up real nice and clear under the down scan image there. But we're only in 2.4 meters of water, so I would have driven the boat with the lecky right over them, or they would have swum underneath the boat. As far as boat noise goes, I've found, and I think quite often Barrow will hear the ticking of the transducer, and they're inquisitive, and they'll come and have a look at it.
I've had a number of people tell me that about bass as well. That and in fact, I've had some tournament bass anglers will say, well, I find the fish, and then I lure them away from the, they're down on the bottom in shallow water. I lure them out and they'll move out onto the thermocline following the transducer, and then they start to bite. So, I get asked a lot, does the transducer scare them off? And I guess it's a little bit like your answer to the motor question is probably depends what they're used to some extent, but I think it does make me a bit curious.
Yeah, well, funny story. I had a mate of mine. We were fishing Fausta one night out on the point there, and we were, fishing weedless plastics. as you do. It was a late night bite, and we had these fish come up right under the literally, they were right here. And I was saying to Tony, I was like, mate, these fish are, we're casting out, you're getting the odd one here and there. And I'm like, but these fish, they're sounding up right next to the boat. And no word of a lie, we ended up figure eighting Barrow on plastics over the side of the boat. Where they were that close to the boat, and obviously I assume because we were anchored, we didn't even have the electric down. We were anchored up, and we were literally leader inside the rod, figure eighting Barrow out of Faust off the transducer. So it was ridiculous. It'll probably never happen again, but so I definitely think that they come and have a look at it.
Yeah, cool. All right, mate. On to the next screenshot, guys. We're just going to keep scrolling through these screenshots. So if you've got any questions, fire them through. Now, a slightly different one here, mate. So what's going on here?
Yeah, similar as before. That was obviously in the same sort of area that we were in. You can see just on the left hand side there, just on my down scan under the temperature and the frequency that I'm running in, there's a little bit of a bait school there. So that sort of tells me that those fish are looking at potentially little herring, small, tinier sort of bait fish. But it's just a cool shot, and it goes to show that's a pretty decent shot. Like I can tell they Barrow, their shape gives them away, and I'm only running 455. So I quite often get asked about what frequency do you run? 800 gives you a really good crisp picture, but I'm chasing information. I want to know that there's fish there, because I'm fishing for them. If I do find something that looks really cool, then I'll definitely go back over it with 800 just to have a second look. And I find that on 800 you're quite limited in your range as well. So I can't see on the top of the screen there what my range was on this shot. So that's 30 meters out, and 2.4 meters of water. So I want that range more than definition, for lack of a better phrase, if that makes sense.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And I guess the other thing that strikes me about this image is there's not a lot of structure there. So you're looking, you've got a 60-meter wide swath, 30 meters out to either side of the boat. You've got some bait there, but these fish are out in the middle of nowhere following the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And that's the thing about Impoundment Barramundi. There's no hard and fast rules. There's general sort of tips and tricks that you can try. That's going to help you out. Like everyone knows, go and fish a wind-blown weedy point. Fish the weed edges, that sort of stuff. But you can find fish in 20 meters out in the basin, schooling fish, feeding on bait out there, or you can find them out on a mud flat, so they move.
You find when they're away from structure that they're actively feeding.
They
maybe
absolutely
retreat back to the structure to rest up.
Faust is a prime example for that. They'll move, they'll go, and it depends on your water temperature too, where your fish are going to be. So that's pretty mild water temperature there, 27.3. If that water was 30 degrees, we got up to 33 degrees yesterday. If the water gets that hot, they just won't be there. So they might move out into deeper water, and I've got a couple of shots here that'll show good thermoclines, where they'll go and sit and suspend in that deeper water, sit in the thermocline in that comfort zone. And then after that, then they'll move back up into the shallow water where your bait's hanging out, and then they'll go for a feed. And then when they finish doing that, then they'll move back into that deeper water again.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to scroll down. Nice bait ball there, obviously being given a bit of a touching up.
Yeah, absolutely. So even in this shot, even though it's just 4 meters of water, that the sort of the dirty line in the down scan image there, that'll be a thermocline. And then you can see there's one Barrow there that's just pushed right into that bait pool there and given them a good touch up. Yep. So that explains itself, So, there's fish there, there's bait there for a good start. There's fish there and they're feeding, and the bait ball gives that away. And that, again, definitely side scan, down scan. You wouldn't necessarily have picked up on the side scan what was going on there, but the down scan did give away. I'll be hitting spot lock on the lecky there and spending a considerable amount of time casting there.
Yeah, you get pretty excited anytime you see something like that. Well, like having a fish. Hey, talk to us about thermoclines and the importance of thermoclines for barra fishing. So for those that aren't familiar with the concept of a thermocline, it's basically that the surface water gets warmed up as you get towards that warmer time of year. Surface water gets warmed up, same as hot air floats, hot water floats as well. So you get the warm water sitting on top, it's cooler water down below. That thermocline is a change of temperature, basically. It's where the temperature rapidly changes from warmer to cooler. And as you move further into the year, over summer and into autumn, you actually get lack of oxygen beneath that thermocline as well. But early in the year, it's more just a temperature gradient. So how do you use the thermocline? I mean, it's a really important feature of a lake, isn't it? How do you use that to find and target barra?
Yeah, well, I'll be watching and seeing where they're sitting on that thermocline. So, like I said, there's one shot there, which I think was about 9 meters of water, where the fish was sitting, 2 or 3 meters down on the sitting on the thermocline, and they're just holding there, and that'll give you a good idea of what depth to be running lures at. They might become up. There's a sequence in here as well, which shows where I think it was over a 40-minute period of the screenshots where there's barra hanging under the boat. We're spot locked. They're sitting real tight on the thermocline. We saw they were there. We kept flogging them. So putting lures over them the whole time. And over the period of, I think, 3 shots and 40 minutes it was all up, you can actually see the fish starting to rise up in the thermocline and coming to have a look to see what was going on. And then, eventually you had them right below the surface. And then, before you know it, we started cracking onto them. So whether it was the lures working over them, bringing them up to come for a feed, or whether it was the actual, bite time, just turning them on and they knew that there was something going on there. We put fish in the boat. That's what counts, But that thermocline gives you a good indication of where to start targeting them, what depths of lures to start running, and, just to get some gear right in their faces.
Yep. So a question from Stephen here, mate. I'm just going to bring up on the screen, and maybe I'll bring us up on the screen as well. So Stephen's asking, there's a lot of hype about Hummingbird. So Lowrance, Hummingbird and Lowrance, what do you love about Simrad, mate? What is it that gravitates you towards that particular brand?
I've just always run Lowrance products, and they've always found me fish. I'm not brand specific for any particular reason or anything like that. Look, electronics at the moment across the board is kicking it right out of the park. Like the features and stuff that's on there at the moment is absolutely ridiculous. But as far as Simrad goes versus Lowrance, I run that Evo 3, the older model Evo 3, and they're pretty on par with the carbons and those sort of things. They do give you better performance saltwater wise versus the Lowrance ones, I believe. But I'm quite happy just running my Evo 3 standard settings with active imaging 3-in-1 transducer on it. And like I said, it finds me fish. They're easy to use. That's probably the biggest thing across the board with any of the Navico products. Their user interface is so easy to use. Whatever you want to look at on that screen, whatever I want to look at, I touch it, I can zoom in on it, mark it, I can do with it whatever I want. I'd definitely say the biggest draw card for me is that ease of use.
Yeah. And I got to say, Vinny, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was buying sonars for boats, everything you read, people are saying, don't pull it out of the box and leave it on auto. You've got to play around with the settings. You've got to tweak it. You've got to get the most out of it. Now, when I talk to the gurus about sonar, they're all saying the opposite. They're saying the auto is so good now, you really, unless you're doing something, out of the ordinary, you really need to touch it. You just leave it in auto and it's going to do all the work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that shows on these screenshots that we're using tonight. Like all my settings are there. I run it easy as 455. My sonar I run in 200. Color line, I'll probably adjust that slightly. Depending on water density. If nothing else. So my contrast, I'll play around with that slightly, but that's it. And you tweak that to suit the water that you're fishing at the time.
What about things like boat speed? I mean, obviously, you're on a trolling motor, you're not going super fast anyway, but is there an optimum boat speed you find for getting good resolution on your side scan in particular?
A lot of people hate me for saying this, but I can side scan and down scan crystal clear at 27 knots on my polycraft.
Yep.
Your transducer placement is on any boat is absolutely critical. That no matter what head unit you've got on your boat or brand, your transducer placement, that's the bunny ears of the television set. If that's not in a good spot, your unit's not going to work. So you can have the most expensive unit on the planet, transducer not in the right spot, you're getting a little bit of air in it, under it, a little bit of turbulation, it's not going to do its job.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
Well, let's have a look at another screenshot, mate, with your brilliantly placed transducer, and tell us what we're seeing here.
Yeah, same as just sort of the previous one. There's a couple of small fish hanging around there. Those individual dots right on the bottom there. And it's just a cool shot of a pretty damn decent barra just hanging around there. Just waiting around on that boat. Yep,
so obvious what they are, isn't it?
Yeah, you can see in that one there too that the fish is holding pretty deep in that water. Like, I mean, it's only 2.1 meters of water. You can see those speckles on that down image, up on the surface there, which is indicating a bit of a temperature difference there. And I think it just shows up like that on these sounders because your water density changes, right?
Yep.
So you end up with that fish sitting right down, nice and deep. It's not in the middle of the water column, right on the top. It's just hanging around. Just on the bottom there, just hugging the bottom.
Yep.
I mean, we've got 30.8 degrees of water there. So this one, adversely quite opposite to the one that we just had before. You got 20 degrees of water. So this was a couple of months ago, winter time when we started scouting to find them. So you got a couple of individual fish just sitting, on the bottom there in that cold water, probably just hating life, just waiting for it to warm up.
Did you do any good that day, mate? Did you manage to
we actually did catch two of them. I think the next shot's got two fish. So these were the first ones. Yeah, there they are there. These were the first ones that we found. And then, found those two there straight after the other four come through. And, we got a couple of those. But, strangely enough, on the screenshot there too, there's a big lay-down tree on the right-hand side there. And you'd think that those fish would be tucked in on that. And they were nowhere near it. They were completely off the structure. We're actually driving in that tree I've marked on a previous occasion, and we've caught some good fish off that. So we went over there to go and have a look at that tree, and found these fish, sitting out in the middle, actually on the way there. We fished them, and we caught those on soft vibes.
And another great example of why the side scan is such a powerful tool, because if you hadn't had the side scan, you'd have gone straight to that tree that you'd marked previously. You wouldn't have known those fish were there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, 100%.
And I guess this is also, and this is reflecting on my own personal fishing journey a little bit, I guess, but one of the mistakes I made when I first started fishing for barra was I just assumed that they were always in structure, and and they're not always. And it doesn't matter whether you're in estuaries or whether you're in lakes; they often come out of structure to feed.
I think in impoundments you get two different types of barra. I mean, it's the same fish, but I think you'll find fish that are sort of structure bound or that prefer structure, and then you get barra. I call them pelagic barra. They fish that they might occasionally school up, and they'll move around. And they'll be like your basin fish that you get out in Faust. They're just there for the bait. They're not worried about structure. They probably know that they're on the top of the food chain, so they don't need to hide. They're used to feeding on pelagic bait. And therefore they're not, ambush fishing, for lack of a better phrase, like your structure fish would be doing. They definitely move around. I find too that a lot of people think that, impoundment barra would just, be stationary, sitting in a weed bed, waiting for something to come by and have a feed, or sitting in the top of the tree, waiting for something to come by and have a feed. And I think impoundment barra move around a lot more than what we give them credit for, what we even think that they do. They're not as stationary ambush. They just, they get around. They definitely do move around a lot.
I know I've spoken to a couple of very successful tournament barra anglers who say very much the same thing, that essentially what they'll do is they'll find a point. They look very closely at moon phases. They look very closely at wind direction, all that kind of stuff. They'll pick a point and they'll spot lock, or they'll anchor up, or they'll tie up to a tree, and they'll stay there because they know the fish are going to come past.
Yeah.
even if they're not showing on the sounder, and they'll fish those peak times, just knowing that eventually there's going to be barra coming past.
Yeah, that's when that mental battle comes in, having confidence in the area that you selected, confidence in your gear, confidence in your electronics that, when they do come past, you're going to actually see them.
Yep.
And setting it out. Yeah.
It comes with time on the water too, that one. It's unfortunately. Yeah.
But it's good though. Like, you can have great days on impoundments, and you can have absolutely hard ones, that just, makes you regret like your sport choices, some days.
Yeah.
But, I think it makes you hungry, there's no 2 days on an impoundment that are the same. Those fish change all the time, and it makes you appreciate when you do catch them, So I like hard days against easy days. I mean, easy days are great, especially when you've got clients on the boat. But, hard days make you think, they bring you back to the drawing board, then you got to try and work out, right. So I had the moon phases right, I had the tides right, but the fish didn't eat. What went wrong, then you can see, we had a cold front roll through 2 days before that shut them down, or something like that. So it's good. It's good not catching them sometimes, because it makes you think. Yeah, it makes you appreciate them when you do catch them, that's for sure.
You do all your learning when the fishing's tough, I reckon. So
yeah, absolutely.
Vinny, how about wind? How do you use wind when you're fishing impoundments for barra?
Wind creates current. So 2 things. It's going to either create pressure points on points and that sort of stuff, which, food's going to drift in there, and then, your bait fish are going to react to that. Your barra are going to be pulling in there looking for bait. The other thing that it does is, with that current that it creates, it helps me plan on which direction I'm going to fish those fish on. So it's easy to cast with the wind and bring a lure back against the wind, but you'll be bringing that lure over those fish's backs. That's not a natural way for them to feed. So as painful as it is, I'll position my boat so I'm casting up against the wind and bringing my lures back with the wind. So your lure's following the current line, your fish will be facing into the wind, and the one leads to the other. And I find, as painful as it is casting into the wind, you quite often will find you'll catch more fish, working lures with the current, with the wind direction, than what you will, fishing against it.
Yep. Yeah, great tip. All right, let's move on to another screenshot, mate. I like this one.
Yeah, so this is the one that I mentioned earlier. So there's a school of barra sitting there on that little drop-off there in that hole. You got those 2 there that come up as brush strokes, and they'll be the fish that are moving, right? So there's 1 or 2 things happening. They're either feeding, because they come up so crisp on that down scan, it means the transducer went directly over them. So they're either feeding or the boat spooked them. I think it's unlikely that the boat would have spooked them. Those fish are sitting 3 meters down in 7 meters of water. So I'd suspect that they're feeding. I'd fish them.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
And that again just shows you how a lot of people will just run side scan, or always run that down scan. It gives you so much information, to tell you what your fish are actually doing.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the one that I was talking about earlier, about that thermocline, where the fish was sitting real deep in it. You can see them showing up, and you can see how thick that thermocline is. We've got 30 degrees of water on the surface there. And then as we go through these, I think on the timeline on the top of the screen there, you can actually see how the time clicks over, how those fish actually started rising up into the thermocline, and then, when we eventually got the bite out of them.
What did you throw on them, mate? What do you throw at fish that are suspending in the thermocline?
Those ones we actually got on plastics, and we started off with slow rolling them through them big paddle tails, just to see what they were doing. And like I said, we peppered those fish for a solid 40 minutes, and until they came right up into it, and then we started getting them once they got up to the surface.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were we saying?
No, you go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that comes back to that versatility of fishing the plastics, that you can take one plastic, and just by changing the retrieval rates and rider heights, you can fish it all the way back, fish the whole water column. So,
I was going to ask a theory that I've heard from a lot of barra fishers is that once you find a school of fish, they'll often have 2 or 3 rods rigged up with different lures, and they'll throw those sort of more subtle lures first, just to see how the fish are going to respond. If they don't get a response, then they'll switch up to a hard body, or then they'll switch up to a soft vibe or something like that, and get progressively more noisy and progressively more aggressive with the lures. And then they get to a point where, well, we still haven't caught a fish. It's time to go and find a new school of fish. But by casting those more subtle lures first, the theory is that they don't spook the fish straight off. And if the fish don't respond, then you just keep trying, more and more aggressive stuff.
Yeah.
Is that the strategy that you use as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Sometimes you can go, the old cotton cordell rattling spots.
Yep.
Those things are loud as anything, and quite often that's what it takes. Just to get them to wake up. They might be just sitting there chilling out, and you can drop something like that, 5 meters down under your boat and vertically fish it up, and you can actually hear the barra eating them, when you're vibing them. So it's definitely worth, starting quiet, and then 100% work your way up.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So
pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. So you can see there that one fish just above your mouse cursor there, how it's actually starting to come up.
Yep.
In that, sorry, I just blanked out there. I thought I didn't even see you bloody well change the screenshot.
That's all right.
It's too quick for me. But you can see in that one there how that fish is starting to rise up. So with that fish rising, that's a couple of minutes on the next shot there. With that fish rising up in that water column, it sort of tells you that, righto, something's happening. So it's either going to be good or it's going to be bad. But those fish are moving. They're either reacting or something, or we're annoying them, and they're going to be moving off.
Yep, we got a comment here from Craig Lattimore. Craig's a previous Masterclass guest. Welcome along, Craig. Nice to have you here. So Craig's made the comment, suspending lures on fish that are not biting, twitch it deep and keep it in front of their faces.
Yeah, that's 100%. That's where the old 7-second pause comes into it. We, especially with those suspending ones, where you can, work it down into that water column, and park it there and just let it sit. Absolutely let it sit. Yeah, 100%.
And if it's properly weighted and properly tuned, it can sit there for 10, 15, even 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without moving, and those fish will sit right on it until you give it a twitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
100%. Good tip.
All right.
Yeah, so that one there you can see that fish is like, 1.5 meters down, if that. So they definitely something going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great sunshot on that one. Now we've got now on this one here too, you can see that there's more fish that have moved up in that thermocline. So it's not just one individual fish that's reacting to whatever's going on. So you've got one more fish that's actually moved up. So the activity level overall with all your fish are starting to change.
So this is an example of what we were talking about earlier on, where perhaps the fish are feeding off each other's body language. One lights up and the rest of the school starts to light up, or maybe it's some, change in some environmental factor that's just happened and the whole school's lit up. But either way, you sat on a school of fish and you just kept plugging away until something happened, something changed, and you started to get some results.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's it, mate. That's all your slide deck done and dusted. So let me just turn off that thing, and we're back on just the two of us, mate. So
yeah, cool.
We're through all the screen shares, guys. We've had some good questions along the way. We've got time for a few more questions. If anyone has a burning question they'd like to get answered, I'd like you to talk a little bit about those vibes, mate. So you talked about the rattling spots. I mentioned the soft vibes as well, which are very popular lures. When do you switch over to a vibe, mate?
If I'm fishing those sort of deeper fish, the vibes work really well in weed as well, which sounds a little bit silly, but you can rip them real aggressively out of weed, and I find that the fish really, they really react to that really well. Progressively as you're getting louder, like we spoke about before, then I'll definitely get onto like a rattling vibe. Get good bites out of them on night time as well. But same with the soft vibes too. It is trial and error, and it's a matter of getting out there, throwing them, and working out what your fish want on the day, or night for that matter. But I'll almost always have one rod with something like that rigged up. Probably the weirdest vibe bite I've ever had is where you cast it rip it, wind it real fast, rip it 2 or 3 times and let it drop for like 2 or 3 seconds, then cast it, rip it again, 2 or 3 real fast rips, and then let it drop for 2 or 3 seconds, and then those fish, they'd fire up, they'd come in behind it, and then as it drops on their noses, they'll suck it in, and we're fishing open water doing that, so, again, it comes back to there's no hard and fast rule of how to do it. You just got to work out what your fish, react to and how they want to feed on the day.
So a question from Roman. Welcome along, Roman. Nice to have you here, mate. So Roman's, again, another previous Masterclass guest, and I know exactly where he's coming from with this because when he was on the Sonar Masterclasses, he was talking about vertical fishing for Murray cod, mate. So he's asking the question about how often you vertical fish with a lipless crankbait for barramundi.
If I get them schooled up in that deeper water, like that 7-meter screenshot showed, where they were schooled up, suspended, definitely vertically fish them. And you can fish them with either lipless crankbaits, vibes, or even soft plastics. Just running a paddle tail or curl tail plastic on a jig head. Matching your hatch, I find, does help there. So if I sort of try and pay good attention to what my impoundment's bait fish biomass is. Definitely look at that. Know what's in there, know what they're going to feed on. If you've got a dam that's got a lot of red chlorine, for argument's sake, then definitely you'll be fishing the bottom more so than anything else. But if those fish are suspended, I'll vertically fish them straight down right next to the boat, and it makes it easy to make tie on a meter long the leader, then well, that's at least 1 meter deep. You can work out your depths pretty quickly, how deep you're fishing, and then you can just take that viable plastic, whatever that you are fishing vertically for them, and set it right in their faces, right on top of them, and just keep it in the school.
So no need for multicolored braid for this situation. You only need a few meters of water, so
absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Stephen, for your kind comment. It's been an absolute blast having a chat with Vinnie. We've had a chat on a few occasions. Stephen says that he's enjoyed the interview tonight, mate. So we're glad we've been able to help. So, folks, I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes. If anyone's got any final questions, please pop them in the chat box now. Otherwise, we're going to say good night to Vinnie and thank you very much because Vinnie's been on the water with a client today. It's been a very long day for him. He's had a fair drive as well, so I appreciate this point in the day, mate, when you're tired and ready to pack it in and catch some kip, that you're here talking to us. So we do have another question come through. So McBarramat. So McBarramat's asking, how do you decide where to start looking for barra when you're in an impoundment, mate?
Start at the ramp. That sounds, honestly, start at the ramp. It's a difference in the structure. You'll 9 times out of 10 on most ramps, it'll create a point. It gives you a structured change. So the concrete breeds algae, bony bream feed on the algae, so that draws your bait in straight away. You'll find quite often most people put a boat in the ramp and they drive as far away from the thing as they can. Put your boat in at the ramp, turn around, turn your sounder on, and see if there's barra around.
Does that include some of those, sort of busier days? Maybe you might be fishing on a weekend and there's a few boats coming in and out. Do you still start at the ramp, mate, or do you try and get a bit further away from the traffic?
Absolutely. Stay at the ramp. Those fish are used to boat traffic. It's not a secret spot anymore, and I'll say it, and I'll probably get shot for saying it.
Not by anyone.
Probably by many people. I'll probably get shot for saying this, but in Faust, the ramp's probably one of the best spots in the whole dam. I've land-based fished the ramp there and caught fish off there, and then pulled lures out of the water, had boats pull their boat out of the water, drive to the top of the ramp, cast down the bottom, and caught fish. So absolutely start at the ramp. The other thing to keep in mind too with ramps, we're fishing stocked impoundments, right? So a lot of your fish that do get stocked at the ramp. That's where they release a lot of fish. So those fish don't always generally travel miles away from there either. So the ramp is definitely the first port of call. Start there, then working out from there. like I said, look for, if you're going from a mud bank to a rocky bank, anywhere where you're going to get sort of substrate changes, that's going to affect your bait. You'll find fish there. Points are always good. I think of fish like mice in the shed. They're never going to run right through the middle of it. They're always going to follow the wall. So if you've got fish moving around, they're going to be moving around that point, and the point concentrates your area that you're actually fishing for them. So if you're casting a lure at a point and the fish comes past there, you're going to probably cross bars with it at some point. And then and that follows on to tree points, weed points, etc. Yeah,
they're also a current break, aren't they? I mean, we talked about wind and those currents that are set up by wind within storage as well. So the points create a bit of a pressure point as well, and a place where bait, as you say, it gets bottlenecked. It has to be sort of pushed out into the main channel a little bit where the fish can pick them off. So points are always, doesn't matter what species you're fishing for, points are always a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks. Look, I'm going to let Vinnie head off now and catch some kip. I'm sure he's got a big day on the water again tomorrow. So, mate, thanks so much for coming along and sharing some tips for us about barra fishing and impoundments. It's been great. I've learned a few things myself, which is fantastic. Awesome. Always great to talk to you, mate. And thanks also, of course, to Simrad and to Navico for putting these masterclasses on. It's always great to be able to come along and talk to some really top-class anglers and get some great tips for our listeners. So, and of course, thanks to everybody who's come along tonight and asked some great questions. You guys are the ones that make these things such a success, because without the questions, it's just a couple of guys talking about some screenshots. So thanks so much. We're going to call it quits now, and I'll let you all go. So until 2 weeks' time when we do it all again,